Well, hello, good evening, and a very warm welcome to episode 5 of Humanity versus Insanity, the Crane Report. Well, it can't have escaped anyone's attention that more insanity is kicking off in the Ukraine right now. And as there is more to unfold there, I'm not going to comment too much on that today. Many other commentators are talking about it. Of course, the mainstream is ramping up, and there's no doubt whatsoever in the minds of the mainstream media that it is Vladimir Putin who is the bad boy in all of this. That may, of course, not be the case. What we're seeing once again is perhaps a little bit more of the global hegemony being wielded by the banksters. The USSR, the former USSR rather, of course, is much outside of the control of the banksters. Russia having a big fat zero debt to the IMF, and the banksters don't like that. So we'll leave that for another week or so, see how that unfolds. But suffice to say, be prepared as the mainstream media ramps the British population up for another illegal conflagration. And the British people need to do exactly what they did in the run-up to David Cameron's call for an attack on Syria, which is simply say, not in my name. Now, tonight was going to be part 2 of Weather Wars with David Lim. But sadly, David himself is a little bit under the weather. And in his own words, he's suffering from man flu. And as we all know, man flu is just one short step from death's door. So David's not feeling up to coming on the show tonight. So my guest tonight has stepped into the breach at the very last minute. And so I'm very grateful to Mike Mitcham. And Mike's speciality is smart meters and Wi-Fi. So we're going to be talking to Mike in just a second, but I also want to take the opportunity to expand the topic beyond Wi-Fi and smart meters, because, no surprise, this is part of a much bigger agenda. That agenda can be traced right back to the 1930s, and this is an agenda for total control. And that, of course, shouldn't really surprise anybody. But we can be very specific here. And I'm going to reference documents that I'm sure a number of our viewers have heard of, and some may have even read. But for the vast majority, this may be coming at you from a completely different angle. So what we're going to be talking about is technocracy. Now, technocracy is actually a term that was first coined back in the 1930s. And these two gentlemen that you see on the screen here, this is Marion King Hubbard, who actually some people may have heard of because he is attributed with being the originator of the term peak oil, when he first discussed the hypothesis of the USA effectively starting to run out of oil in the 1970s. Now, it's a discussion for another evening, but that, of course, was a total construct. A construct that was jumped upon by the Club of Rome. But a few years before Marion King Hubbard's famous speech at the Society of Petroleum Engineers in San Antonio in 1957, some 25 years earlier, he had joined forces with Howard Scott. In fact, Howard Scott, being some 13 years his senior, was Marion King Hubbard's mentor. And in 1931, and then published in 1932, they drafted a document called Technocracy, Inc. Now, this 1932 document is very much the blueprint for a lot of things that are happening today. The ideas were there in the 1930s, but the technology wasn't. But guess what? The technology is now catching up with the ideas. So let's just take a look at a summary of ideas that were presented in Technocracy, Inc. in 1932. So what we see on screen here, number 1, register on a continuous 24-hour per day basis the total net conversion of energy. So here we see a reference to effectively what has become a resource-based economy. Number 2, by means of the registration of energy converted and consumed, make possible a balanced load. Number 3, provide a continuous inventory of all production and consumption. Number 4, provide a specific registration of the type and kind, etc., of all goods and services where produced and where used. Number 5, provide specific registration of the consumption of each individual, plus a record and description of the individual. So, as you can see, everything that's occurring today in terms of attempting to literally track and measure every single move that we make, almost every thought that we have, can be traced back some 80 odd years ago. So, on that note, let's welcome online my guest tonight, Mike Mitcham. Mike, how are you doing there?
I'm doing good, thanks. How are you?
I'm very good. I'm very good. You're looking like you're in your bunker there.
Absolutely, hunkered down.
Very good. Now, Mike, over the last 2-3 years or so, you've focused very much on smart meters and Wi-Fi. Can you give us a quick overview as to what it was that got you into this subject?
Sure. I'm guessing maybe approaching something like 3 years ago now, I was actually invited to an industry event. My background is in IT, and I was invited to an event that was discussing networking technologies, and one of the themes was IP version 6. And I was in effectively a closed meeting, but what somebody disclosed to me, much to my horror, given how nonchalantly this was essentially revealed, is that there are plans afoot to introduce regulations that will force property developers and construction companies to put RFID transponders into buildings as they're being built or refurbished. So I kind of, picked my jaw up off the floor and asked the question as to what measures were being taken to fight this kind of invasive technology, because this opens up a whole world of not only monitoring and surveillance and privacy loss, but also control. And I was kind of met with blank stares, really. So that was my first taste of what is becoming increasingly known as the Internet of Things. That is a very clever marketing term to sell in what is essentially a plan to eliminate privacy. There are plans afoot essentially to put radio frequency identification chips, so these are tiny microchips, into pretty much anything that we can find in our possession. In fact, the CEO and chairman of IBM, a gentleman by the name of Sam Palmisano, I think in 2008, 2009, spoke at the Council on Foreign Relations in New York. And he explained that we're now at a point in the technological story to be able to make every product, every object, every process, every service, and every human network attached and network aware. So for anybody that doesn't know about the pedigree of IBM, they have some case studies for horrific applications of technology that goes back to before World War II. And they're also the organization that provided seed funding for Positive ID, or Verichip as it was called, which is now called Positive ID, which is essentially the human microchipping company. So this was kind of my first taste of the smart grid and its ties into the Internet of Things. And it was some months later that I became aware of smart meters and how these were going to provide the center point, the hub, for taking data out of your home and your behavior at home, and migrating it into the world of corporations and government who are seeking to capture, analyze, model and profile our behavior at home. And they're doing it under the guise of an energy meter upgrade.
Now, Mike, as it happens, the electricity meter is something I'm fairly familiar with, because we look at the screen here. What we see on screen right here, eventually. No, we don't. Let's. I think it's a finger error on my part. There we go. Now it's on screen. That's the problem with live TV. And you can't get good help these days, you know, it's terrible. What you see on screen there is the traditional electricity meter, and this is primarily a technology that was actually developed way back in the late 19th century. And for almost 100 years, the only technological change was the reverse pole magnetic bearing on the flywheel, which of course drives the registers there. And there had been absolutely no modification whatsoever to this device other than sort of aesthetics for best part of 100 years. And then in the early 1980s, we have the development of the electronic meter. Now you'll notice that the name on the top of that meter is Schlumberger. And this meter was actually developed at Schlumberger's plant in Felixstowe in Suffolk in the 1980s. And I was actually assigned to Felixstowe for a period in the 1980s. And so I'm very familiar with this product. And so this was the development. And then we went into the 2 rate. This is the Economy 7 electronic meter with no moving parts. But then, of course, although the aesthetics didn't change too much, it's still in America, this is the round casing of the traditional external electricity meter. What is inside is very, very different. So literally in the past 32 years, we have seen a phenomenal leap forward in the technology of managing or monitoring electricity consumption. So now, Mike, why don't you talk us through? I've got, by the way, I've got some of the slides that you sent over now. So if you want to reference any of those, just give me a shout. Okay. But what I want to do is just put up a slide here, which looks at the reach of the network here. Because the whole idea, of course, is that this is a smart grid. And I know that we're going to be talking about the impacts of Wi-Fi, particularly on humans, and particularly vulnerable humans. But the smart meter, whether it's the gas meter, the electricity meter, and ultimately the water meter, is a core to this proposition, correct?
Could you rephrase that? It's a core. I didn't quite catch the question.
The meters, the utility meters, are an absolute core part of this agenda to effectively monitor all activity.
Right, exactly. So the difference between your traditional energy meter and the new smart meter is that not only does the new smart meter monitor, capture and monitor your energy and water use, but it also communicates your energy and water use in up to near real time back to your energy or utility company. And it provides the means for individual appliances, and obviously for, or at a future time it will do, and it provides the means for remote disconnection, which is currently not possible. So it does this using, the reason why Wi-Fi and other wireless technologies are important to talk about here is because the smart meter contains 2 transponders. One is for communicating with your home area network, as it's being dubbed, which is basically going to be a wireless network that you have in your home that's been made possible by the smart meter, if you agree to have one. And that's using Wi-Fi based signals, and we can talk about the suppressed health issues associated with that. But it also uses cell phone technology, mobile phone technology, to communicate capture the data or communicate the data that's been gathered from around your home area network and send it back to the energy company. So it's basically using 2 microwave transmitters. And this is the difference. So it opens up a whole world of monitoring of your activities and your behavior at home, particularly when it's paired up with this Internet of Things concept where everything is becoming smart and is having the ability to be connected to over a wireless network. And people simply aren't being given the facts about these technologies. So, our campaign is dedicated to just raising awareness about how these things actually work and what dangers they represent. Putting it in summary, they represent a danger to our health, they represent a danger to our privacy, they obviously represent a danger in respect of the fact that this is capturing data about occupants in the home. It presents an issue from a personal security point of view at home. It has enormous implications for the security of our energy grid, because what we're talking about here is our entire domestic and small business energy supplies being put onto the internet. So right now, your computers at home, if you have a computer at home, presumably you do if you're watching this show, that's the gateway that you use to connecting to the internet. And I think most people will be aware of antivirus type technologies and firewalls, etc., that you use on your computer in order to prevent attack and from your machine being compromised. Well, basically, the threat that and the risk that you take is that your computer becomes infected. Okay, if that happens, it won't shut down your energy supply. It won't prevent you from cooking your dinner, or unless you're looking up an online recipe. It's not going to have an implication from any serious point of view on how you're living right now. As far as the smart meters goes, this is providing anyone who has the capability and know how to do so to disconnect on an individual, community or nationwide basis our energy supplies, potentially at times when we need these supplies the most, for example, in the winter months or in the summer months.
And of course, the utility companies are ostensibly foreign owned anyway, so we're effectively handing over control of the utilities right now, but where that is potentially leading is literally control of everything. You won't need any kind of military force to take control of a nation. You can simply do it through anything that is classified as smart. Let me go back to this graphic that we had up on the screen just a few seconds ago, because what this graphic is showing is literally the connectivity of everything in the house through the smart meters. So it's the oven, it's your sockets, your lights, your microwave, your computer, your TV. I mean, a few years ago, of course, it would have been considered to be an absolute rampant, raving conspiracy theory to suggest that the TV in your front room had the capability not only to monitor what you were watching, by sending that data down through the internet connection, but they would also contain a remote camera, or a camera that could be controlled remotely, so that whoever has access to that network can actually switch it on and watch what you're doing in your living room. And of course, that was exposed in the mainstream media just a few months ago, and companies like LG and Samsung pretty much acknowledged that it was indeed the case that this technology had been incorporated into their latest generation TVs.
Yeah.
So obviously, with this information, and the whole idea, of course, like you say, is everything is microchipped. So the reality is that every time you take a product out of your fridge, it registers that. Every time you use milk to make tea or pour on your cereal, it actually registers, or potentially could register, how much you're using. So consequently, everyone's life can be monitored right down to finite minutiae. And then, of course, it doesn't take too much in terms of modeling to literally be able to predict somebody's behavior.
Yeah. Absolutely. And the important thing to bear in mind here is that if you are one of the kinds of people, or know these kinds of people that say, well, I have nothing to hide, there's an important thing that needs to be borne in mind here, in that if you are giving away your data, you're doing so to predatory corporations that have responsibilities to their shareholders. They might pay lip service from a corporate social responsibility point of view, but primarily the success of the board of directors of any energy company, it depends on how profitable they are and how well they monetize the assets that they have within their business. So if you're happy for your data to be harvested in this way, and for you and your behavior and the behavior of your family to be modeled, then you have to appreciate that you're going to be controlled. This data is not captured just from a habit point of view. The purpose behind monitoring and measuring and communicating this data and being able to predict behavior ultimately leads down the road of controlling behavior as well.
Right, Mike. On that note, let's take a step back in time, because obviously some people who are hearing this will just go, no, this is the technology, but they're not going to use it like this. This is just paranoia. Well, let's just go back, because one of the advocates of Technocracy Inc., in fact, a guy who was very friendly with Marion King Hubbard, was none other than Zbigniew Brzezinski. And this is the book that he wrote in 1969. It was published in 1970. This was the book that actually got Zbigniew Brzezinski recognized by David Rockefeller. And from that moment onwards, Zbigniew Brzezinski basically was on the payroll of Rockefeller and has been Rockefeller's strategist, and again the right teeth in here, has been his strategy specialist. In fact, it was Zbigniew Brzezinski who flagged up Jimmy Carter to Rockefeller, and then the Rockefellers financed Carter into presidential office in '73. Yep. But in this book, Between Two Ages, America's Role in the Technotronic Era. Yep. Now, obviously, Marion King Hubbard and Howard Scott had used the word technotronic. This is Brzezinski's word, technotronic. And I just want to share a couple of quotes with you from this book. Here's the first. This is from page 97. More directly linked to the impact of technology, it involves the gradual appearance of a more controlled and directed society. Such a society would be dominated by an elite whose claim to political power would rest on allegedly superior scientific know-how. Now, this next bit is very, very interesting, and I will ask our viewers to listen very carefully to this. Unhindered by the restraints of traditional liberal values, this elite would not hesitate to achieve its political ends by using the latest modern techniques for influencing public behaviour and keeping society under close surveillance and control. Now, he continues, or actually, this statement appeared even earlier in the book. He says, no matter how deeply disturbing the thought of using the environment to manipulate behaviour for national advantages to some, the technology permitting such use will probably develop within the next few decades. Now, this was actually an all-encompassing statement, but I mean, what we see in Brzezinski's book here is a further development almost 30 years on from the appearance of Technocracy Inc. in the early 1930s. And basically, Brzezinski has been effectively a prime driver of the introduction of this control and monitoring technology for the last 50-odd years. So what we're seeing is effectively the manifestation of an agenda that was actually established 80-odd years ago.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming. And, how it's presented to the public is This is, what the home of the future is about. It's presented in really slick marketing terms, big budget adverts that we see on TV now, with cartoon-like characters acting in cool ways and talking up, how this is the modern way. And what's just simply not talked about are the massive downsides that come along with this technology, in order to help these corporations and governmental organisations and agencies achieve their aims of getting these things into our homes. To give you an example of some of the uses that are being mulled over, or some of the kind of types of information that can be gathered, I have a report here that was penned by Dr. Ian Brown of Oxford University's Internet Institute. And if I can just rattle off a couple of things here that your smart meter will allow to be captured and sent to corporations that are looking for ways to monetize this information. How often do you entertain? Are you a restless sleeper? Do you get up frequently through the night? Do you own lots of gadgets? How much time do you spend in front of your computer? Do you eat hot or cold breakfasts? How often do you get a full night's sleep versus driving sleep deprived? How often do you arrive home around the time the bars close? In a custody battle, have you ever left your child home alone? How often and for how long? In a workers' compensation hearing, how is it with your disabled back you were able to turn on the TV in the upstairs of your home less than a minute after turning off the lights downstairs? The list goes on and on and on and on. And this kind of information, particularly, really, really sensitive information about how we are behaving at home, most people just have not got a clue, because they're being told these are meter upgrades. And a lot of the energy companies are lying to people, just barefaced lies, saying that they have to have them. They're even making up laws that simply don't exist. I'll make the point now that you are under no obligation whatsoever to have a smart meter in your home. No one that I know of is in a position even to legislate for forcing you to have a piece of technology in your home that spies on you and irradiates you around the clock. So if any energy company tries to tell you you have to have one, refer them to our website, and feel free to come to our website as well for more information on that front. But the realities of these technologies and the world of opportunity that they're opening up for corporations to exploit how we act and behave and live our lives previously in privacy is just phenomenal. This is the thin end of the next step in the technocratic agenda.
Well, and nobody should be surprised, because I've already referenced the two of the books that are in the public domain. I mean, people can go and buy or even download the PDFs, Technocracy Inc. and Between Two Ages. And the first time I read Between Two Ages, I thought, actually 1984 is tame. Because Between Two Ages, I mean, obviously it's not a novel. It's not written as a novel. It's not an easy read necessarily. It's not something that, well, you might read it just as you're trying to go to sleep, because you might get through half a page and you'll nod off. But when you actually put the pieces together, then it all starts to build up into the picture. And the reality is that this book actually went out of print for a number of years. And then the demand was really quite incredible after 1997, when Brzezinski wrote a book called The Grand Chessboard. And basically, The Grand Chessboard is the primer for the PNAC document, Rebuilding America's Defenses, which was published in September 2000, exactly 1 year before 9/11. And that document, of course, is the absolute script for everything that is unfolding today. And so consequently, those of us that consider ourselves to be geopolitical analysts, we don't claim any special insight. We simply read the scripts. We know where to look, and we know where to dig. We know who to look for. We know who's likely to have said this stuff, and we can find it. And everything that we're talking about here was scripted before the technology was effectively viable. They probably had the technology, but just not in a viable form. But now it's in a viable form, and literally within probably, or certainly a generation, if the British public, and of course this isn't just Britain, I mean this is a global control grid, but if the public basically concede this and allow these meters to be put into their home, along with everything else that is being used, as part of the control grid, mobile phones, your internet search engines, the use of credit cards, debit cards, and anybody who's got loyalty cards, cut them up. Cut them up immediately, because the loyalty card is nothing more than a revenue generator for the companies that issue these cards, because they then sell that data on to third parties so that they could use it for their own marketing. And of course, this is all about the global corporatocracy, and the corporatocracy effectively ensuring that they are providing for everybody's wants. Now, Mike, I know that you're not just an internet campaigner by any stretch of the imagination. And last year, I believe it was, you actually put in an appearance before the Common Select Committee. And I got a picture of you here, looking very studious. So you want to tell us what was going on here?
What was going on here was what I think was, on the surface, seemed to be a kind of genuine invitation to put our concerns forward, and I think to a certain degree it was. But you'll notice to the right-hand side of me, as you look at it, we have Dr. Jill Meara, who is Deputy Director of what's now Public Health England, what was previously the Health Protection Agency. We have Dr. John Swanson to her right as well, and this was effectively a battle. It was Dr. Swanson and Dr. Meara versus myself and my colleague, Dr. Elizabeth Evans, who helped me set up Stop Smart Meters. And we got an opportunity to get some things on record, but it really resulted in no discernible difference to the programme at all. We revealed some pretty startling information, but it seems to have made no difference.
Well, it was a box-ticking exercise, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That's all it is. It's a box-ticking exercise to say that they have held a public consultation. Now, I seem to remember, I don't know whether the video of this particular meeting is still up on YouTube.
Website.
It's on your website. Okay, well, I would encourage people to go to your website, which is?
stopsmartmeters.org.uk.
stopsmartmeters.org.uk.
That's it.
Okay, and we'll mention it again before the end of the programme.
Okay.
But if we look at the screen here, there's a particular individual who, because I can remember watching this as it was being broadcast live, and I mean, this individual here, I'm sure you can tell me his name, but I mean,
Barry Gardner.
Who was it?
Barry Gardner, MP.
Barry Gardner, MP. But I mean, his behaviour and his attempt to, if you like, belittle the evidence that you were giving was a classic illustration of why it is that people no longer have respect for supposedly elected representatives.
Yeah, I would go along with that as well. There was an attempt to just take the argument away from the body of evidence that Liz and I were putting forward, and into other realms that essentially were irrelevant. So yeah, it's an interesting watch. We've got it on our homepage. I'd encourage people to go and have a look.
Okay, we'll put a link up on the YouTube of this. Of course, we have to write it out longhand because YouTube don't like links. But we'll get the website link up. Now, obviously, we've got the issue of control. Yeah. And the fact that this is literally managing data minutiae, literally down to every time you draw breath, almost they can calculate how many times you're breathing in a minute. But I mean, there are other aspects as well, and this was really first brought home to me when I was over in New Zealand a couple of years ago, and I met with a gentleman there who has made his career out of helping families determine whether or not their house is being bombarded by electromagnetic fields. Yep. And he's certainly helped a number of families. I mean, obviously, as we know, not everybody is susceptible to EMF. Some people are extremely sensitive. I mean, interestingly, I believe it's the gentleman who is the managing director of Gingsters Foods, if my memory serves me correctly, who is so ultra sensitive to electromagnetic fields that he has to work and live and drive inside a Faraday cage. Otherwise, he finds, being exposed to the sort of natural, the unnatural levels of electromagnetic fields debilitating. Yeah. So this gentleman in New Zealand, I mean, if families are sort of finding that they're suffering unexpected health effects, he visits their house. And I mean, the most extreme case that he told me about was a young boy who was 7 years of age, and he developed a blood disorder and a tumour. And it was discovered that his bedroom wall, in fact, the wall that his bed was alongside, was the other side of an electricity substation. So this is older technology, nothing Wi-Fi about this. It's simply a case of the bed was inside the EMF of the transformer. Yeah. Now that's the sort of old technology, and fortunately in the UK, I think generally the substations are kept away from being alongside properties. But now, of course, we're exacerbating that with all the Wi-Fi. So, well, what has your research flagged up in terms of the impact of Wi-Fi exposure?
Well, you mentioned earlier, Ian, that you are essentially hanging these people by their own petard. You don't have to go looking for evidence beyond what has already been penned by these organisations that are now kind of helping to deny that some of these problems exist. This is a document by the Naval Medical Research Institute that was written back in the early 1970s. And it by 1971, and it basically, this is just a bibliography. This is a compendium of 2,200 studies showing harm from microwave and radio frequency technologies. This is a document. It's unclassified. It's by the Defense Intelligence Agency. It's called Biological Effects of Electromagnetic Radiation, Radio Waves and Microwaves, Eurasian Communist Countries. It was prepared by the US Army Medical Intelligence and Information Agency, Office of the Surgeon General, in March 1976. And I'm going to read a paragraph to you. If the more advanced nations of the West are strict in the enforcement of stringent exposure standards, there could be unfavourable effects on industrial output and military functions. So it's going to be bad for business if we admit that these technologies are doing harm. I don't know whether we've got time to look at some of the slides, but we could maybe show just how some of these technologies cause harm.
That's what we've got up here. This is 50 minutes with a cell phone turned against the ear. Now, if I remember rightly, 2 years ago, there was a gentleman in Italy who successfully sued a phone company because he developed a brain tumour from using his cell phone like 8 hours a day. Yeah, absolutely. And there's more cases like that, and just to kind of expand on the point about where admissions have been made, we have a patent on our website that shows, or a copy of the patent that was lodged by a company called Swisscom, which is a Swiss telecommunications company, and it openly talks about the influence of electrosmog on the human body and that it's a known problem. It says when, for example, human blood cells are irradiated with electromagnetic fields, clear damage to hereditary material has been demonstrated, and there have been indications of an increased cancer risk. Aneuploidy, which is a chromosome aberration, was observed as a function of the specific absorption rate, demonstrating that this radiation has a genotoxic effect. So some of these companies know, and they're applying for patents to try and
figure out ways to maybe make them safer. But as far as I know, that technology has never been deployed on the market.
Well, of course, we see companies like Hill and Knowlton, the PR company that was employed to convince everyone that smoking was good for them and that there was no link whatsoever between smoking and cancer. And in fact, I was living in the US at the time that all the CEOs from the cigarette companies stood in front of the Senate committee and held their hand up and all swore that they had seen nothing that led them to believe that smoking was in any way related to lung cancer. This is the same company, of course, that's being employed right now by the unconventional gas industry to say that there's no relationship between hydraulic fracking, and the negative health effects being experienced by people who live in those areas. Now, we've got another slide here up on screen, and this is showing the penetration, the EMF penetration. And of course, what we are clearly seeing here is the significant difference of penetration between the EMF, this is using the phone on the right ear here, between the adult and the 5-year-old. And I mean, in reality, I mean, it absolutely appalls me, you know, sometimes when you see in the streets, you got children, you know, in their buggies, and they're playing with an iPhone because it keeps them quiet. And the parents, sadly, have zero comprehension of what that Wi-Fi connectivity, or you know, the EMF from the phone, is actually doing to the developing brain. I mean, personally, as far as I'm concerned, nobody under the age of probably 14, and even that's maybe a bit generous, but nobody under the age of 14 should be permitted from actually using or holding a cell phone up to their head, because we know that the developing brain is much more susceptible than the adult brain. Yeah,
absolutely. So what we saw in the previous slide was effectively a brain scan that was published in a peer-reviewed journal, the Journal of the American Medical Association in 2011. That was the cell phone that was turned on next to the head. It wasn't even making a call, and what we saw was a change in cerebral glucose metabolism in the brain. So, you know, if anybody's saying, well, show me some peer-reviewed evidence, then you can look no further than that. If we move on to the next slide.
Well, Mike, actually, just before we do that, we're running out of time, as I told you we would. And as I said, that you know, we are definitely going to need more than one program to explore this part of the attack on humanity. And so, Mike, assuming that David has recovered from his man flu, then hopefully we'll be able to continue with our investigation into weather wars next week. But hopefully the following week you'll be able to return and we can continue this discussion on the impacts of EMF. But before you do go, I want to draw people's attention to the interview that you did with my good friend Henrik Palmgren on Red Ice Radio, Red Ice Creations. So if you want to listen to that interview, then just simply search for Mike Mitcham, Red Ice, and you'll hear his interview there. And Mike has been instrumental as well in helping in the actual production of this video, Take Back Your Power. And in fact, you even got me a bit part in that, I seem to recall, Mike. And but this DVD, which has been produced in the US, looking at the advancing smart meter agenda in the US, but it is available from your website, I believe.
Yeah, you can find a link to on our website. If you go to the URL and then /film, you can watch it, live stream it, and also we are accepting donations for the cause. We give out free leaflets, so if anybody wants to become a benefactor and offer us a donation of 20 quid, we'll send you a big pack of leaflets, some stickers for your current meter, and a copy of the film as well on DVD. Okay, and to reiterate one of the things that you said earlier, there is no requirement on people to accept smart meters. But once you have accepted a smart meter, it is going to be very difficult. In fact, there's legislation in the process of being introduced that will make it nigh on impossible for somebody who moves into
into a house with a smart meter to have it removed. So you can resist the installation of a smart meter, but once it's in, you're effectively, potentially, as people wisen up to this, you're potentially reducing the saleability of your property by putting a smart meter in there. Now, Mike, you're also going to be joining us at AV5, Alternative View 5, Humanity versus Insanity conference in Staverton, May the 16th to 18th. This is not a normal conference. If you're coming for or think you're coming for a weekend where you can sit back, then unfortunately that's not the case. This is going to be a conference where we want people to get involved. There's going to be plans of action. This is the time for humanity to take back its power in every sense of the word. With an election coming up in 2015, we have plans afoot to be a thorn in the side of the socio-psychopathic mainstream or lamestream parties. So, Mike, thanks very much for joining us this evening. We look forward to hopefully seeing you, if not next week, the week after. Yeah. And, of course, at AV5. That's all for Humanity versus Insanity tonight. But if you are watching live, join me in 45 minutes on Fracking Nightmare. Take care.